You open your refrigerator and stare at it for a full minute without knowing what you want. Shelves of packaged food, dozens of choices, and somehow none of it feels like enough. That confusion is not a modern flaw. It is the echo of a diet your body was never designed to navigate, because for almost all of human history, food did not come from shelves. It came from the ground, from trees, from animals you chased for hours, and from a level of variety that would make your refrigerator look embarrassingly small. Think about what you assume ancient humans ate: mammoth steaks, raw meat torn from a fresh kill, maybe a few berries on the side. That image is mostly wrong, and the real answer is far stranger, far more varied, and far more revealing about why your own eating habits feel so complicated today. For more than 2 million years before farming existed anywhere on Earth, humans and their ancestors survived as foragers. Not as meat-obsessed hunters, not as passive grazers. As opportunists who ate whatever the season, the region, and sheer luck put in front of them. Some weeks that meant meat. Most weeks, it meant something far less glamorous. Anthropologist Richard Wrangham has spent decades studying what this diet actually looked like, and his research points to one ingredient that mattered more than any single food: fire. Wrangham's cooking hypothesis argues that the invention of cooking, not the invention of meat eating, was the true turning point in human evolution. Raw plants and raw meat require enormous amounts of energy to digest. Chewing alone can take hours a day. Cooking breaks down fibers and proteins before they ever reach your stomach, which means your body absorbs far more calories from the same piece of food. Wrangham argues this single shift, cooking food over fire, freed up so much energy that it allowed the human brain to grow to its current size. Your oversized, energy-hungry brain may exist because your ancestors learned to burn plants and meat instead of eating them raw, but cooking still needed something to cook. And here is where the mammoth steak image falls apart completely. Primatologist Katharine Milton spent years studying the diets of wild primates and comparing them to early human ancestors, and her research reveals something surprising. Most of the calories in early hominin diets likely came from plants, not meat. Roots, tubers, nuts, fruit when it was in season. Underground storage organs that had to be dug out with tools, sometimes for hours, just to get a single meal's worth of starch. Milton's work suggests that the popular image of prehistoric humans as primarily meat eaters dramatically overstates how often meat was actually available. Meat was valuable. Meat was celebrated. But meat was also rare, unpredictable, and often shared across an entire group the moment it was caught, because a large kill spoiled fast, and no single hunter could eat it all alone. So what filled the gap between hunts? Digging. An enormous amount of digging. This is where researcher Alyssa Crittenden's studies of the Hadza people of Tanzania become so important. The Hadza are one of the last remaining groups on Earth who still forage for the vast majority of their food, using tools and knowledge passed down for generations, largely unchanged since long before farming existed anywhere nearby. Crittenden's research on the Hadza diet found that tubers, wild fruit, honey, and baobab pods make up a huge portion of daily caloric intake, often more than meat does across an average month. Even children in Hadza communities learn to dig for tubers themselves, sometimes providing a meaningful share of their own food by the age of 5. This is not a culture defined by dramatic hunts. It is a culture defined by patient, repetitive, deeply skilled foraging spread across dozens of different food sources depending on the season. Feel that shift for a second. The image of the caveman gnawing on a giant leg of meat is mostly a myth built by museum dioramas and cartoons. The real ancient diet looked more like an ever-changing rotation of roots, greens, nuts, insects, seasonal fruit, occasional fish, and meat only when the group got lucky. Some days delivered a feast. Most days delivered small, steady, unglamorous meals gathered by hand. Here is what made this diet so different from yours. Variety, not restriction, was the default setting. Ancient foragers regularly consumed dozens, sometimes over 100 different plant and animal species across a single year. Compare that to how many distinct whole foods you eat in a typical week. Modern diets, especially processed ones, often draw from a shockingly narrow list of ingredients dressed up in different packaging. Corn, wheat, soy, and a handful of vegetable oils show up disguised in thousands of products lining your shelves. Your ancestors' bodies evolved expecting constant nutritional variety. Your modern pantry offers the illusion of variety while quietly delivering the same handful of ingredients over and over again. This mismatch explains more about your relationship with food than you might expect. Your brain still carries ancient reward circuits built to crave calorie-dense, hard-to-find foods, because for millions of years those foods were rare and worth chasing. Fat, sugar, salt. In the ancient world, these were signals of a nutritional jackpot, a food worth prioritizing because you had no guarantee of finding anything that dense again for days. Your brain has no evolved mechanism for a world where that jackpot sits within arm's reach, refrigerated any hour of the day. So it reacts the way it always has. It craves, it rewards, it asks for more long after your actual nutritional needs have been met. This is not a personal failure of willpower. It is ancient software running inside a completely modern environment. Your cravings are not evidence that something is wrong with you. They are evidence that your brain is still calibrated for scarcity, dropped into a world defined by abundance. It's worth pausing on just how different this made the eating experience itself. A meal was rarely a solitary act. Food acquired through hours of shared effort was, more often than not, shared again once it returned to camp. A large kill fed dozens of people over several days. A good haul of tubers or fruit was distributed among family groups long before anyone sat down to eat. Eating together, splitting effort and reward across a group, was not a cultural nicety layered on top of survival. It was survival, your instinct to eat socially, to feel that food tastes better shared, to associate meals with connection rather than isolation, likely traces back to this same ancient pattern, one built around a group that depended on each other for every single calorie. There is another twist buried in this history that most people never consider. Farming, when it eventually arrived roughly 10,000 years ago, is often imagined as an upgrade. More food, more stability, more civilization, but the archaeological record tells a more complicated story. Skeletal remains from early farming communities frequently show shorter stature, more dental disease, and signs of nutritional deficiency compared to the foragers who came before them. Early farmers ate an enormous amount of a very small number of crops, usually grains, and lost the broad nutritional variety their forager ancestors relied on for millions of years. In many ways, agriculture solved the problem of unpredictable food supply while creating a brand new problem: monotony. The very narrowness that defines so much of modern eating did not start with fast food. It started with the first wheat field. Think, too, about how much labor stood between an ancient forager and a single completed meal. A modern meal appears in minutes, unwrapped, sliced, seasoned, and ready. An ancient meal often demanded hours of preparation before a single bite was safe or edible. Many wild tubers contain toxins that must be leached out through soaking, roasting, or pounding before they can be eaten without harm. Certain nuts require cracking shells thick enough to challenge a stone tool. Some plants had to be identified correctly among dozens of similar-looking, inedible, or even poisonous lookalikes, a skill passed down carefully from one generation to the next because a single mistake could be fatal. Eating, for most of human history, was not a passive act of consumption. It was an ongoing act of knowledge, skill, and risk management, refined over a lifetime and never fully separated from the physical work of finding, processing, and preparing food. This constant effort also meant ancient humans burned a tremendous number of calories simply acquiring their next meal. Walking for miles to reach a reliable water source. Climbing to reach fruit high in a canopy. Tracking animals for hours with no guarantee of success. Modern researchers who have measured the energy expenditure of groups like the Hadza have found their daily activity levels far exceed what most people in industrialized nations experience today, even accounting for modern gym routines and step counts. Yet despite this constant physical output, obesity and related metabolic diseases were exceedingly rare among traditional foraging populations. The explanation is not a mystery ingredient or a forbidden macronutrient. It is the combination of constant movement, wide dietary variety, and food that was never engineered to override your brain's natural sense of fullness. That last point deserves its own moment of attention. Modern processed foods are frequently designed quite deliberately to combine fat, sugar, and salt in ratios that do not occur together in nature. Food scientists sometimes refer to this as the bliss point, the exact combination of ingredients that maximizes craving and minimizes the signal that tells your brain you have had enough. Nothing in the ancient environment prepared your reward system for a food engineered this precisely. A wild fruit is sweet, but it is also fibrous, and eating too much of it quickly becomes unpleasant. A wild root can be filling, but it requires so much chewing and digestion that overeating it is physically difficult. Ancient foods came with built-in limits your body understood instinctively. Modern foods often remove those limits entirely, leaving your ancient satiety systems with nothing solid to push back against. So the next time you stand in front of your refrigerator, unsatisfied despite having more food available than any forager ever had in a single lifetime, you can name exactly what is happening. Your body is not confused by abundance. It is starving for the variety abundance was supposed to deliver, but rarely does. Ancient humans did not eat massive quantities of any single food. They ate dozens of different things in small amounts, dictated by season, location, and luck, stitched together into a diet richer and stranger than a modern shopping cart could easily replicate. Understanding this will not make your refrigerator any bigger, but it might change how you look inside it. Because the real ancient diet was never about restriction, and it was never about meat alone. It was about range, about digging for roots you had never tried the week before, about eating fruit only during the handful of weeks it existed each year, about treating every single food as temporary, seasonal, and worth savoring precisely because you might not get it again for months. You open your refrigerator and stare at it for a full minute without knowing what you want. This time, you know exactly why. Not because there is too little in front of you, but because for the very first time in human history, there might finally be too much of too little.